Hi, Jeff. Welcome to Contemplative Light.
Thank you very much. I'm pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's very much a pleasure to have you. I suppose with viewers and listeners that aren't familiar with you, do you want to give yourself a brief introduction of who you are and what your work is?
Sure. I've been running a martial arts academy here in Portland, Oregon since 1994. I started training in martial arts and the meditative arts about 36 years ago. And I also have an online program, The Yielding Warrior. I just finished out writing a book called The Yielding Warrior on the philosophies around yielding and how to integrate those into your life. The academy here is kind of like my second family. I have students that have been with me here for almost 30 years and a lot of great people coming in. It's a fairly decent sized academy for a martial arts school. There's about 500 active members here and 14 employees that come and keeping it open, which is great because they're all like family as well. And so it's really a good environment.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I guess I'd like to go ahead and get to some of the topics that are great that we're going to discuss. And, the first thing I wanted to ask you about was the meditation techniques you have to really kind of jumpstart your energy.
Yeah, so there's within the meditative practices, and I kind of look at the meditative arts as a pretty big package. There's things like that we pull from the Tai Chi, from the Qigong, from sitting meditation, standing meditation, from breath work, from yoga postures. There's all different directions and things that you can do when you're building a meditative practice. And, within the meditative arts, there's the five different directions of the training. So you have like what we call the martial or the athletic side, the philosophical side, the meditative side, the spiritual side, and also the medical side. And so, all of Qigong theory is based on like in the old days, like if you went around to Qigong doctors, all of them would be Qigong masters. Today, you can go to school and learn where to put the needles and learn about the herbs and study the medicine side of it. But it's the Qigong itself is very deep and there's a lot of different directions that you can take it. And so when you're building a practice around your lifestyle and the things that you want to get involved with, it's good to have a little bit of idea as far as why you're doing this because there's so many different styles of meditation. It's really easy to maybe get off on a path of maybe something that's possibly not the best approach for the outcomes that you're looking for.
Right, right. So, as far as viewers and listeners that are not familiar with the kind of athletic, physical side of martial arts, uh, what about I'm especially curious about the medical side.
Yes. So within Tai Chi and Qigong, there's the three basic methods of that we do with the practice. There's ritual practices, there's active practices, and there's philosophical practices. All of these are like the fundamental basics for developing a meditation program, whether you're doing it for the medical side or the athletic side or the philosophical side or the spiritual side or whatever your motivation is. And so we use these to build a good solid foundation, and then you can kind of branch off in any direction you want. And when I say a ritual practice, what I mean by that is when you set, you know, 20 minutes aside every day or an hour aside every day, whatever that is for you, and you turn inward and work on some form of meditation, being a sitting practice, a standing meditation, a qigong set, something where you're just focusing on yourself, your breath, your body posture and movement, and that kind of thing. Then we have our active practices, and the active practices are a really valuable tool and very important to your training as well. And those are great because you can do them when you're standing in line at the grocery store, or you're walking down the street, or even in your car at a red light. And they could be as simple as counting out 10 breaths, or maybe doing some spinal rotations, something to bring your awareness back into the body. And then there's the philosophical side of the training as well, where you can use that either in an active practice or a ritual practice. And so as you're building your practice, you want to pull things from all of these areas. And remember that, meditation isn't meant to be a hobby that you do once in a while. It's more meant to be a way of life. And so as we're taking things from these different areas and building an evolving practice for ourselves, we want to kind of keep this strategy and idea in mind.
Yeah, fantastic. And as far as meditation, maybe a sitting meditation, do you put emphasis on breathing and breath?
For sure. And so in the Chinese philosophy, they use the terms kan and li, or water and fire. And the breath on the inhale, we look at that as the water side of the breath, and the exhale, the fire side of the breath. And so Qigong is often referred to as the science of the breath, and there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies and patterns and things that we'll do with the breath, because there's a different outcomes that we want to get with the breath. And so if we want to bring the energy inward and get to a deeper, more holistic style of meditation, we could do more yin oriented breathing exercises. And an example of a yin breath would be is if you ever listen to somebody sleep, their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And that's the body's natural way of bringing your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. And so, if we want to emulate that in our meditations, we can do longer inhales, maybe soft retentions at the end of the inhale to help bring that energy inward and get closer to that subconscious mind, but without falling asleep. Then we have the other side of the breath, a more kind of yang, powerful side. Whereas if you ever had to push your car, you pick up something heavy, your natural instinct is use the exhale side of the breath, and that helps build up energy and create power. So here's kind of the cool thing about this is when you start learning how to use the breath as a strategy, now you can use this to get different physical, mental, and emotional outcomes throughout the day. We all go through times in the day where we have emotional ups and downs, right? Some people are like a roller coaster, others of us might be a little more balanced. Well, when you start noticing something start to rise, you can use the breath to help settle you down and keep you more balanced. And the same thing, if you start seeing yourself start to decline, you can use the breath to charge yourself back up and to find a more even balance throughout the day. And if you ever notice, a lot of times people aren't really clear on how this can affect you. So if can ever remember a time where maybe you were depressed or you cried a lot and you got sick, this is because we're doing that yin oriented breathing and we're inhaling and we're chilling the body, we're weakening our immune system because of the way that we're breathing. So a lot of the practices that we do that are very yin oriented meditation practices, we'll do them more in the spring and the summertime because it's less likely that you're going to catch the flu or the cold in that time of the year. And so if you want more yang exercises, or say maybe you're somebody who is recovering from chemotherapy and you want to build and strengthen your immune system, you could do more yang aggressive energy work to help build and strengthen that immune system. And so the breath is really a scientific tool that's very useful in our physical state, our mental and emotional well-being.
Yeah, fantastic. One follow-up question I have is when people do kind of get in that subconscious, does that often bring up a lot of subconscious material that then has to be processed?
Yes. So, meditation is that idea of looking inward, and you start to see things that a lot of times we put blinders up on, and it's kind of like the way our society is, in that we often wear masks when we go out in the public all the time. We're not trying to be vulnerable around certain people or let people see who we are in this scenario or that scenario. And we get so used to putting up these masks to try to protect ourselves. A lot of times we do that when we're alone and we're, you know, just trying to communicate internally with our mind, and see how we really feel. And if you're not used to coming back to letting those masks fall away and really look inside, a lot of times there's things that are going to surface in your practice that maybe you haven't dealt with, but that's very healthy in that, we do need to deal with these things and learn how to move through to the other side.
Fantastic. And, I agree that definitely matches with my own experience in meditation. So, I guess I don't know, maybe you've touched on it a little, but, what about the more philosophical side?
Yeah, so the philosophical practices uh, can be anything from like a gratitude practice to memorizing sayings. One of my old meditation teachers had me memorize the Tao Te Ching, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's a book of 81 sayings. And we can have a saying like that you could go through, that you could use as an active practice when you're walking down the street, or it could be integrated into your ritual practices. And by doing that repetition, one, it helps us be more present, it helps us be in the moment, and it oftentimes will program the mind to think a certain way, or to give us an idea or an energetic state that we want to move towards. So we might have certain philosophical sayings that maybe amp us up and get us ready to go do something if we want to be energized. We might have other philosophical sayings that help us turn inward and make us a little bit more peaceful. And so you can use these practices like that, and you can use old scripture, like something like the Tao Te Ching, or you can even make up some of your own that are important to you, that have some kind of value, that help you reach a mental or physical state that is important to you.
Yeah, that really resonates. There was a period in my journey where I read the Tao Te Ching out loud every day, as if it was kind of a prayer I was
Right.
saying, and reading it out loud was a very powerful practice. Maybe I need to start doing that again. I'm glad you mentioned that. So, yeah, I mean, this is all really fascinating. I guess yeah. Do you find that more people have yin deficiency or more people have yang deficiency?
Oh, it's pretty much varies from person to person. I think though a lot of people don't really understand where they're a little bit more yin or a little yang, and a practice like this will help you come to light with that and help you find the balance. And one of the most common things I hear, from people is that, I've tried meditation, it just didn't work for me. I can't quiet my mind, or whatever the reason is, but that's a very common one. And what makes you successful with meditation is that consistent daily practice. When somebody new comes in here to the academy, I don't even want them to come here unless they're willing to have that idea and that mindset that they're going to do at least 20 minutes a day of a ritual practice. Because if you don't have that discipline to do that, you're really going to miss out on all the value of what meditation is about. And, it's, when it comes back to quieting the mind, that's not what meditation is meant to be. Meditation is meant to develop that skill set to bring you back to focus. So, say, for example, you or I were going into a meditative practice, we might get distracted 100 times during that hour that we're meditating. And that's normal. Nobody can 100% quiet their mind. It's going to drift, it's going to go to different thoughts. And that's okay. But every time you drift off on a thought and go down a tangent somewhere, and you recognize that and you bring yourself back to focus, you're getting that repetition of being distracted and now being focused again. And if you do that 100 times every session and you're doing that every day, you're going to get pretty good at learning how to get back to focus. Now, when something happens during the day and you're stressed out or you get distracted or something comes up, you've had so many repetitions with bringing that distraction back to focus, you can use it in anything you do in life, which is very powerful.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. I'm a little bit familiar with, well, I'm a lot familiar with hermetics. I don't know if you are aware of that, but one exercise, which I guess would be to boost the yang, that I've actually done in my own journey is to imagine myself in burning fire everywhere, to just kind of visualize myself as if I'm in a burning fire and I'm breathing in and out fire. And that visualization kind of turns into manifestation, and my whole system gets charged with fire. I guess that would be dealing with yang energy. Is that a practice you would resonate with?
I think visualization is great, and something you could add to that is maybe a little bit of the breathing strategy and focus a little bit more on the exhale side of the breath. Maybe put a retention at the end of that exhale, or maybe even add a little bit of tension or an audible sound to that exhale and bringing that out there. And that's going to help even expand it more and bring that yang energy out.
Oh, that's really helpful. I'm glad you said that. So moving on, you had some other mentioned topics about increasing performance with ritual and things like that. Obviously, meditation, the way you describe it, would do that. But do you have anything else to add about maybe getting in peak performance?
Yes, a lot of high level performers use the meditative arts to enhance their game. I'm sure you've probably know who Phil Jackson is. When he was coaching the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan on the team and they won all those championships, he was having his players use the meditative arts to help build and enhance their game. And one of the things that happens with performance is the idea of yielding. And yielding to me is one of the coolest concepts in all of the martial and meditative arts. And it's, I just recently wrote a book called The Yielding Warrior and talks about different life experiences and how to integrate those in performance and different things that you're doing. And within the yielding arts, as far as performance goes, there's three different levels of yielding. There's physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is often on the surface level that we use in athletics or combat sports all the time. And the idea of physical yielding is, say I push you or you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage can push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. And so I can respond with less effort. So I don't have to try to see if I'm bigger and stronger than you. And it's it's obvious how this is helpful in martial arts because I'm not always, if I'm walking down the street, I might come up with against some guy who's, can bench press 3 times what I do. And there's no way that I'm going to wrestle that guy to the ground, right? So I've got to learn how to yield to his force if I'm going to survive that encounter. And so that would be an example of physical yielding, and it's used all over in athletics everywhere. Yielding is very strategic, and it helps us be smart and direct in our approach, rather than a lot of people look at yielding and they think that they're giving up. Yielding isn't about giving up. Yielding is being strategic to get the least amount or the least amount of resistance to get the outcome that you want to get. Now, in order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. You need to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium. You have to be relaxed. The breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. It takes years and years to get to a high level of this, but when you do, this is where it starts to become pretty interesting, because now not only do you notice these things in more detail inside yourself, but you also start to see them more clearly in other people. And now we're kind of moving into what we call mental yielding. In mental yielding, an example of that would be, say, I say something to you that unsettles you, and I'm able to pick up on it when it's like this. It's a lot easier to adjust that conversation and keep us in a happy place than if I'm not paying attention to that. And pretty soon you want to knock me upside the head. And so learning how to use yielding in all of our interactions, one, you're just being more considerate, which is a good thing to do at any time. And two, you're starting to be more strategic in your conversations to get positive outcomes and lead the conversation or direction of any interaction, whether it's a negotiation in business or whatever you're doing, towards a positive outcome with the least amount of resistance for both parties. And so it's a very powerful in that use. Then there's also emotional yielding, and emotional yielding is very much like mental yielding, but it's with your own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about, oftentimes things will happen to us and we'll respond and we'll go down this path. We might get an hour, a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But with yielding, if we could have noticed it here and taken a step back and said, maybe this is a better approach, it can save us a lot of heartache on the other side. And so, I've been explaining the idea of yielding to people for years, and one of the most common things I hear when I tell people this is that, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do that all the time. And I totally agree. I think everybody uses yielding to some degree all of the time. However, it's kind of like if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, he would see things about that crime scene that we would have no clue of, the series of events, the timeline, how things kind of progressed. The meditative arts helps us see things in ourselves and in other people that I feel like you could never see that much detail without cultivating some kind of a meditative practice. So it really is powerful in how you can use that. And, a lot of times people ask me, why do you do meditation? Why do you do Tai Chi? And, they never ask why I do jujitsu or why I do Muay Thai. But when I hear that, I'll often tell them, if the only benefit of the meditative arts was the idea of yielding, it'd be enough for me to want to do the practice, because I feel like if you could really master that skill of yielding, you could do so much positive with it.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, so that was great. I just yielded to my cough. Um, but I got to go back. I can't resist. I love that you mentioned Phil Jackson, because I did follow him. And I remember one time, I think this might have been later after the Bulls, but he was in the semifinals with the Phoenix Suns, and they had kind of gotten up in the series, and he was asked at the press conference if he was worried about it at all. And he said, "No, I'm not worried. I'm having fun. This is playoff basketball. It's what it's all about." And it kind of threw everybody off that he was so relaxed about that. So Yeah, that's really cool you mentioned him, but yeah, what you're saying I think is going to be very helpful to our listeners. So yeah, moving on, you've mentioned exercises also to stay more grounded, and I do think that's very helpful because I think a lot of times people's tendency is to get up in their head rather than, for instance, pay attention to their feet touching the ground.
For sure. And, one of the things that we work towards with meditation is learning how to be more grounded while at the same time raising our spirit. Because most people, when they get excited, they get light in their feet and their body gets tight and they're it's just a natural way that most people get excited. But if we can take that excitement level up and that presence and that awareness and at the same time sink our energy down so we're rooted, now we're reaching that point where we get in that flow state, which is what all athletes talk about when everything feels almost effortless, or they could just feel it happening, or they knew it was going to happen before they made the shot. And to be able to do that is an amazing skill, and especially to be able to do that under pressure. And the only way to do that or experience that at all is by developing this kind of a practice. But to do it under pressure is a high level of skill, but a very valuable skill that can be used in so many different areas in your life.
Yeah, you mentioned flow state. I did hear this one podcast. I don't know if it was you, I can't remember who it was, but I heard this one podcast say something very interesting, and you may disagree. I'm curious what you say, but they said in order to go to a flow state consistently, in this economy here in America, you needed to be making at least $70,000 a year because otherwise the anxiety would be too much because you'd have too many security concerns. Do you agree with that, or do you think anybody with any income can go into the flow state?
Well, I don't know if you can really put a number on that. I do think that you have to have things settled in your life everywhere. And if you are stressed out about money and you've got a lot of those concerns, I could see how that being very distracting. However, there's probably a lot of teenage kids that are playing sports that are really in tune and able to reach close to that flow state that don't have nothing to worry about. And they're not making any money. So, you know, I think it's probably different for everybody. Uh, but I can understand where they were getting at when they said that.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I kind of think they can I kind of understand it as well too. Um, well, we've run through a whole lot of very helpful things so far. Is there anything you feel like's missing or a kind of a core thing you want to add?
If you're considering doing a meditative practice, the one thing that I would recommend more than anything else is that you be consistent, commit to 20 minutes a day. You know, the Dalai Lama once said, everybody should meditate 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should meditate for an hour. Everybody should have at least 20 minutes to look inside, take the mask off, try to let the walls come down and just listen to yourself and try to have a little bit of that every day. And if you do that and integrate a few active practices here and there throughout the day, it can be life-changing. And if you're not sure how to do that and you want to learn how to build an evolving life practice, please check out my online program, theyieldingwarrior.com. You can go there and try it out for a couple weeks. There's a lot of different meditative practices and strategies that you can integrate. Or if you'd like to check out a free copy of my new book, The Yielding Warrior, you could go to theyieldingwarrior.com/book, and you could order a free copy of that. You just have to pay for shipping and handling.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a gift you're giving. That's great. And I'll put a link to that under in the show notes. So, and it's, all this is good to hear because it certainly resonates with a lot of my own experience. And, I've actually given clients that I coach the same idea of doing 20 minutes of meditation every day, and then after doing that a month, just notice the changes. And there's usually always changes that they notice if they can stick to just doing it 20 minutes a day.
Yes, I've been running this academy now for about 30 years. And one of the things that I've noticed is that the students that come in that listen and do their 20 minutes a day and do their active practices and hit a couple classes a week, and if they can keep that up for a year and really make it a habit and a lifestyle, I bet a high percentage, 90 to 95% of the students that do that do this practice for the rest of their life because they see so many benefits by that time that there's no reason why they would ever stop.
Yes, yes, exactly. And you mentioned the Dalai Lama. I remember seeing him on a um I think it was kind of a book panel with neuroscientists, and he said the more you do something, the easier it becomes to do. So if you can build up a rhythm with doing those 20 minutes, it's going to be much easier to do. And like you said, you will feel such benefit from it. You will definitely want to do it.
Yes, totally agree.
Okay. Well, fantastic. It's been great and a true pleasure talking to you. And I'll put your information in the show notes, and I definitely encourage listeners and viewers who resonate with some of this to get that free copy of your book. It sounds like quite a gift. But thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording, but if you could stay on a little after, that would be great.